break into some breaking news from neworleans.football, a Saints authority, Nick Underhill. Nick, thank you very much for doing this. I'm sure you got a lot to worry about today.
Yeah, a little bit, man. But hey, there's a few guys that could have called me today, and I would have showed up to do this. You're one of them. I love listening to the show. I think you do a great job. Respected your writing and everything for years. So thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it.
Really appreciate it, man. You wrote a piece today. If you're a Saints fan and you're not, subscribe to Nick's site where he's doing a lot of great work that you really can't get anywhere else. Highly recommend that you go check it out. I am not a Saints fan and I am a subscriber, so I think that's all you need to know about the type of information they're putting out over there. You wrote a piece today really about how this all came together. So I want to get into that, but I want to talk about it on a big picture level first and foremost. Just thinking about how Derek Carr at this stage of his career, at the price they're going to have to pay for him, fits into the Saints' plans. So why Derek Carr? Why in this moment does this marriage make sense to you?
The Saints aren't a team that I think are ever going to just pull back and start a rebuild. They're always going to try to go forward. They're always going to be the team that trades up in the draft. They're always going to be the team that kind of does the mafia accounting on the salary cap. And there's people that aren't going to like that, and they aren't going to like the approach. And look, I understand it. I think there's times, maybe even going into last year, where you're kind of looking at it and you're like, does this make sense anymore? Like, once they missed out on Deshaun Watson, like, why are you still kind of, going for it the way you are? But where they've kind of built their team is if they pull back now, like their core of players, Alvin Kamara, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, even Marshawn Lattimore, like guys like that, Ryan Ramczyk, you waste the end of their careers. You just traded all these picks last year to get Chris Olave. If you don't get a quarterback now, that trade was for nothing. And you just gave up a top 10 pick for Andy Dalton to throw passes to Chris Olave for another year. So I think just kind of the way they build their team, where they're at, how they operate, this is a move that kind of makes sense for them. And look, I think, you kind of look at the finalists here. It's the Saints and it's the Jets going for Derek Carr. The Jets have picked in the top 5, I think, twice. Their last good quarterback, I think I would say, would be Mark Sanchez, maybe. I mean, and they're the team. They're the team.
That's going how you define good.
I mean, it was the last time that it felt like it. But yeah, I mean, it's been a long time. So I think just kind of, it allows you to get somebody in the fold. And the one thing I would say is I don't think it precludes them from continuing to look in the draft for people, but at least then you're making moves you want to make. Maybe you're trading up to get to 10 one year to get Patrick Mahomes instead of trading up to 10 to get Mac Jones because you feel like you have to. So I just feel like if you can get somebody that's kind of a solid quarterback in a bad division, and you can win the NFC South and you can get into the playoffs with all the stuff they've done, it kind of makes sense for their very specific situation.
I think that's the important part to point out, is that it's a very specific situation. If you were doing this in a vacuum, signing a 32-year-old quarterback who's, let's say, the 12th best quarterback in the league on a good day, it's a dicey proposition. It's going to limit you in some of your other team building avenues and possibilities, and you're going to cut some avenues off for you to make yourself better. But they're not operating in a vacuum. They're in a very specific situation where you have an aging roster. I believe they were number 1 in the league at snap-weighted age. Bill Barnwell pointed that earlier this spring. Not surprising when you look at some of the most prominent players on the roster, where they're at in their careers. They don't have a ton of draft capital. They obviously got the first back in the Peyton trade, but they're giving away a top 10 pick in this year's draft. So they don't have that many avenues to a rookie quarterback contract. This is a way for them to compete right now. And I said it in December, when it kind of all the writing on the wall seemed to point to Derek Carr being released. Quarterbacks like this just don't get released very often. Yeah. Whatever you think of Derek Carr, there's a reason that he had multiple suitors, multiple teams wanting to come after him, because quarterbacks of this caliber, top half of the league quarterbacks, like, I think that's a fair characterization, don't typically become available. So now you have this roster that's ready to win now. You had a top 5 defense last year, and you can drop a very capable quarterback onto that team. There's some dicey elements to that rationalization. Who knows if the defense will keep being this good? It's 1 year older. So many different needles you have to thread for this to work out and look like the Matthew Stafford situation in Los Angeles. But they had put themselves in a position where you're going to have to thread a needle anyway. So this isn't a bad strategy overall, considering the alternatives. I get that.
Yeah, look, I think that they're in a spot to you just look at it and it doesn't make sense to back up. And I hate to say that, because like everything I think about football in my core beliefs, kind of before ever covering the Saints, like the Saints have challenged those, and then they kind of make me look at them a different way. And then all of a sudden, like, you're arguing for Derek Carr and you're like, why am I arguing for Derek Carr? Like, this isn't how I want them to operate. But I don't see the alternative. Like, people talk about top 5 guys all the time. like your odds of drafting Zach Wilson, Blake Bortles, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, or whoever, even if you become a bad team, are a lot higher than actually going up there and getting someone that's going to change your franchise. You look at it. I just did a study recently, and it was going back like 10 years, and like 75% of the seasons after a team drafted someone in the top 5 ended in a non-playoff berth. And that's just kind of the reality of the situation. People get overdrafted, and it is hard to have that perfect Easter egg of a draft pick work out, and you go in and you go out and you get Trevor Lawrence. Like, it doesn't happen that way very often. Again, look at the Jets. Been there twice, didn't happen for them. And the other problem with this too is that if the Saints just didn't get a quarterback and they were kind of like, we'll mail in the season, like their defense is probably going to be too good for them to be picking very high in the draft. They're 10th this year, and they had the most insane injury luck I've ever seen in my whole life. Like, they just were losing player after player. Like, if you looked at their roster before the season and you said, Marshawn Lattimore is going to miss 10 plus games, Mike Thomas is going to miss the whole season, Jameis Winston's going to break his back in week 1. And, there's a bunch of other stuff going down the list. But I think just even with those 3, you'd have been like, oh man, their season is terrible shape, but they still ended up picking 10th. I mean, so I think just with how good they are on defense, they're going to remain good on defense. It's going to be tough for them to find any other avenue to getting a viable quarterback. And I'm sorry, but like maybe Hendon Hooker ends up being great, but if that's your plan at 29, like Andy Dalton and Hendon Hooker, I just don't think that's a viable option. So this is something that I think they had to do. And I like it for the team too, in the sense that Dennis Allen now, there's not going to be any excuse for the season. He reshook up the staff. He got all his defensive coaches over there. It was kind of eyebrow raising to get rid of Chris Richard, but he's got Woods and his guys over there now. It is his defense. It is his staff entirely. Kind of the last relics of the Sean Payton era on the defensive side of the ball are now gone. All of them are. It's completely DA staff, and it should be. I mean, he's one of the better defensive minds in the league. So he's got that, and now he's got his quarterback. So if it doesn't work out, there's no excuse. I mean, they've set this up. They have the pieces that they should need to be able to succeed in this division. And, there's just really nothing to say after this point. So I like that the factor fiction on everything, all the pieces are there to actually kind of really know what they are and what they're going to be moving forward. And look, if it fails, then the seat should be hot and they should be looking at all that stuff because they got their guys now. And this is the guy he wanted. He drafted him. So this is his quarterback. And now we'll see how they do.
I think it's just about exploring what the alternatives might be. Yeah, a top 5 quarterback is great. They don't have a top 5 quarterback. They can't go get a top 5 quarterback right now. The second best thing to have is a capable quarterback on a rookie contract. They're picking at the end of the first round. It's not a range you could typically find those guys in. They get overdrafted, like you said. They already have a lack of draft capital going into the future. That 2024 second that they traded away. It always seems like, as I look through every team's draft capital, they're just missing random picks that I always forget about. But that's the spot that they're usually operating from. So continuously trading up from that spot, especially in a draft where it seems like a lot of teams will be looking for quarterbacks in the top 10, you don't really have an avenue to find a rookie on a quarterback on a rookie contract this year. So then what's the next best thing after that? It's probably a capable veteran starter. And when you have to pay up for that, it's not ideal, but not every team is operating in ideal circumstances. And I think that's where the Saints are. So let's talk about the pursuit of Derek Carr and kind of how they tried to sell themselves to Derek Carr. You talked about, the initial meetings, the dinners that they went to. Just walk me through what that pursuit looked like from the Saints side of things.
So yeah, they were the only team that really got in the mix with the Raiders to try to execute a trade. And everything I've heard about that is that Derek just wasn't going to approve a trade, period, with the way they handled it. That Saints
Why
were
would
the only
you?
team. Yeah. And look, the other thing too is that they didn't let him talk to more than one team. Like maybe if they let him talk to multiple teams and weigh his options a little bit, maybe then he approves a trade. But like it just never made sense. Like why weaken the team? Why let the Raiders get something? The only reason would be is I do think when we see this contract, maybe it's a little bit lighter than the previous one. Yeah. And maybe having those numbers in place gives you a little bit of leverage to maybe negotiate a better deal. But I think when we see like the real numbers, it's going to be a little soft.
What do you think it's going to be?
So I don't know where it ended up. Everything I heard last week at the Combine was that they were kind of hovering around 25-ish of real money per year. I wouldn't be surprised. We saw the report Sunday night about him leaning towards the Jets. Maybe it got up around 30-ish, but I think it's going to be in that 25 to 30 range of just like real actual money. Now, the average annual value per year, whenever it comes out, I'm sure it'll be a little bit bloated. And then when we see the actual contract, those numbers will come down a little bit. I think it's a little bit telling that, I don't know, what are we, 2.5 hours into the story breaking and we still haven't seen the contract yet, except for the year. So I think that says something too. But yeah, they were the only team to kind of negotiate that. And obviously it got turned down, but they went out to dinner. Michael Parrington, their director of pro personnel, was there. Dennis Allen and his wife, the offensive coordinator, Pete Carmichael, was there. And Pete Carmichael ended up being a huge selling point for Carr. One of the things with him last year in Oakland, like they didn't really let him have a lot of control over the stuff that was happening on offense. And that's kind of surprising to me because I came up covering the Patriots and like everything was option routes and kind of reading the defense and calling plays and, quarterback controlling thing at the line of scrimmage. I guess they didn't do a lot of that in Oakland, and he had a lot of that control under Gruden. And those were his best years with the Raiders. So Carmichael wants someone that can kind of make their offense go. Like they want someone that can go up and they can set the protections and he can read the defense and he can call 2 or 3 plays and you read the defense and okay, we're running this play based on this look. And they want a quarterback that can do that. And Carr wants to be able to do some of that. So kind of sharing that vision solidified it for him a little bit. He didn't know a lot about Carmichael at the time. And coming out of that became a huge selling point for him. And then he heard from Drew Brees and Brees kind of sold him, on the culture and how things are done there. And how open it is for input going back and forth on everything. And Ian Book shares an agent with Carr, and he was with the Saints for a few years. He talked to him, kind of just heard about the culture and how things are done here a little bit. And then last week they go to the combine, they meet again, they talk. It was a good meeting. Coming out of that end of the week, they start negotiating a little bit on the numbers, and that's where things started coming together for him kind of quickly. The thing about the Jets came out, I felt pretty confident. I was telling people to bet the house on the Saints even after that came out. Like I just didn't see where it was going to go that way. Everything I heard and everything, from both sides, it just felt like it made too much sense for this to not come together. So, look, they got their guy, and plan B, as you were kind of mentioning it, I don't know where they would have went from here. One of the names we kept hearing was Jimmy Garoppolo, and that kind of seems like the obvious plan B for anybody that wanted Carr and they don't end up getting them. And I think Andy Dalton would have been a very serious option. The one thing is it just felt like they were done with Jameis Winston regardless. I don't think he was going to come back here. There's a sad part of me that kind of is just always going to believe that if he gets another chance, like he could maybe do some things somewhere, but it's just not going to happen here. And that kind of became apparent last year. So I think it would have been Jimmy G or Andy Dalton, probably both. I think they would have tried to bring both guys in, and then you look at the draft and you probably end up overdrafting Hendon Hooker because you kind of have to.
The control over the offense and the ownership over the offense, I think, is such a great point because it's really different with the Jets. That system that they run, assuming that Hackett's going to bring a lot of those kind of LaFleur, Shanahan kind of aspects to the offense, similar to what the Jets did last year. The quarterback doesn't really have a lot of control in that situation. It's why Aaron Rodgers had so much trouble early in his time there, because the coach plays through the quarterback in that system. And the Saints aren't like that at all. You are setting protections. You do have a ton of control. You mentioned, and I've talked to people over the years about this a lot, those dot meetings that they have on Saturday night before the game, where the coach is literally going with the quarterback through every single call on the sheet that they could possibly have in every single situation. And you're getting to dot your favorite plays in all of those moments. So in the day before the game happens, the quarterback gets to shape the game plan with the coaching staff. There's a ton of ownership. And Derek Carr, one of his best attributes is the way he sees the game. He is very, very smart and very, very football smart. And getting to wield that at that stage of your career, I think that's a selling point. I totally get why you would choose that situation over something like the Jets. And in terms of supporting cast, there's been this kind of shaping of the narrative around the Jets that it's quarterback away team and you drop the right quarterback on there and it's a great situation. I don't think it's a better situation than what the Saints have right now with their offensive personnel. Chris Olave, I think, is just as good as Garrett Wilson if didn't have a better rookie year. The offensive line, in my opinion, has fewer question marks than the one that they're trying to piece together in New Jersey. Penning in year 2, one of the best right tackles in the league. Their interior, Eric McCoy's been a really reliable player. We'll see what happens at those other spots and how they save money, which we can get into in a little bit, I guess. But I do think that the other pieces that they have are just as good or better than the one the Jets have. Alvin Kamara is there. So you're running out of reasons why the Jets are a better landing spot than a team like the Saints. So this doesn't surprise me at all. We were doing our quarterback carousel show a couple weeks ago, just trying to pair teams together. Carr and the Saints always made the most sense on both levels, and I'm not surprised that we landed in this spot.
Yeah, the one thing I would say for the Jets is that maybe they're a little bit younger and they feel like they're ascending, and maybe their window will be open a little bit longer with kind of their young core. But you go to
I'm 32. I don't give a shit how long the window is. I want to win right now.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you go to the AFC East and it's tough. You got Josh Allen in the way Miami's going to be good for a while. Belichick's, who knows what they're going to look like, but they're always going to be tough in the division against their opponents. So you might not make the playoffs. And then in a couple of years, maybe you're going through these changes again and you're kind of in the same situation you were in with the instability and everything. And then, like you said, the AFC is crazy. You come to the NFC South. I mean, it's basically Derek Carr and Kyle Trask. Like, I don't even know who the other starters are going to be this year for the other teams. Like, it's wide open right now. So it just kind of felt
NFC
like
in general.
Yeah.
But let's look at the landscape of the NFC, period. If Rodgers gets traded out of there, who's the best quarterback in the NFC?
I mean, there's an argument that like Carr's like a top 5-6 guy in the NFC right
I think
away.
at least. I mean, you got Dak, Jalen Hurts. Kyler's not going to play for half of the year. Who knows what the hell's going on in the NFC North right now? There is a real opportunity. When you're dealing with quarterbacks in this tier, I had a really good conversation with the head coach at the Combine about this. If you're in that kind of second to third tier of quarterbacks, you obviously understand that your margin for error is smaller. You're going to need to get in the dance and then have 4 or 5 coin flip plays go your way over that 3 to 4 game stretch if you get into the playoffs, going back to what the Rams did with Stafford. And if you're the Saints and you're looking at the landscape of the NFC and you really have no other place to go, you can absolutely talk yourself into that timeline. It's like we get in, we get a guy who can have those 4 or 5 moments that truly elevate us, even if he doesn't do it play in and play out, game in and game out. I get if you're Mickey Loomis and all the guys in that front office getting yourself to that place.